Um, and yeah, people really cling on to that hope that this is going to be this big cure for this huge disease.
But what's funny about all this is that's fine by me. You can be bullish. But what I don't understand is you are you think you're good at analyzing medicine, you're good at picking binary events. Well, if that's true, why haven't I heard about you? Why don't I know who
Oh
you
yeah,
are? Why don't have I seen you in the other situations I've been in? Like, I don't know, the last 25 years. Are you going to be in the
oh for
next
sure.
situations for the next 25 years? Like,
Yeah,
I see you every time there's a binary, like clockwork at Z55, you know? And we
yes,
don't we don't do
yeah,
everything the same. We don't have
no,
every portfolio trade the same. I've probably taken the opposite trade sometimes from you and vice versa. And
yeah,
I've been wrong and you've been wrong. Like it's just life. Like this is how we make our money. This is how we invest. To get
yeah.
upset
Some of
about
these
it.
folks, they just learn, they get hit once and then they're out.
They
You know
always
what I
say the
mean?
same thing. I learned that biotech is rigged. I learned that biotech is impossible.
Yeah, it's funny. But I mean, the phase one data looked really bad, and I don't know. I mean,
I'm
they're doing it
curious
in
why you say
Australia.
that.
What's that?
Why do you say that? Where did they ever put out phase one data?
Yeah, the INmB, they actually have like on their due diligence thread. Yeah, because it's been so murky, it's been put out in like little press releases, or
Yeah.
it's like tidbits of it. There was never one comprehensive. Well, there's no publication in a peer reviewed journal. It's all either press releases or KOL type presentations where they'll selectively include some data. There's never been like, a full, accounting of what went on during the phase one.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
from what I can tell, only half the patients actually completed the study. And they were supposed to be doing things like, mini mental status, some basic cognitive parameters.
uh,
And what's really telling is that the data they released was one of their investigators just coming up with like a subjective assessment of like, they did much better, a little better, neutral, a little
yeah.
worse, much worse. Like that's such a, subjective analysis. They didn't include mental status or anything like that. And they can't really show a dose response because the only patients who completed it to the end were the high dose and then like a couple people on the low dose. And they don't tell you which patient improved or didn't improve. It's all lumped into one.
I shorted
And I mean,
it and I bought puts. Sorry. So
oh, you shorted in bot puts?
yeah, but so I wanted to ask you on this. So no publication. You've never worked in pharma, right?
No,
So do you know what a CSR is by any chance?
no, at least not by acronym.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
So it's something called a clinical study report. So after
Okay.
you, yeah. So after you, um, basically commission a clinical trial with the CRO, they have to give you a deliverable. That deliverable is usually the CSR. And the
Right.
CSR
Okay.
is, it's company confidential information. It's not, um, something that um, you can't necessarily share, but you could theoretically just post it. Like the CSR is like what you pay for, basically, right? And um, so they have that. Like they could tell the truth about phase one, and it's not hard to just put it out there, right? Like this phase, like I'm looking at slide 16 that you love so much on my stream. It's the one
Oh
year,
yeah.
yeah. the 1 milligram per kilogram slide. N equals 6. And it's the CSF inflammation composite percentage change, which I'm assuming is percentage change from baseline. But
Right.
there's no placebo group in this, right?
Right.
Why would you do a trial without a placebo group? I've never heard of this. Like, this is how you calibrate, your assay.
Right.
It's the whole fucking point. Is that if you don't calibrate your assay, how do you know the assay works? What if it just, you know, uh, has so much noise that it's useless? It's
And
it's not
they
hard
said
to
that
just
of the
enroll two
48,
people.
the 48 cytokines, the rest were not, because that's not 48 there. It's like 30 maybe or something. They said they couldn't detect the other ones, but who knows?
Yeah, so cringe. I mean, look, they seem like they're relatively new to pharma, even though RJ, I think, I mean, he did phase threes at CNTO, Coronado, CNDO.
Hmm. I know the
Um,
neurologist had been around for a while, and she was really interested in Parkinson's disease, where this did not show any benefit
is that the
in
person that went
animals.
back to, or is that the CMO, or who are they?
It's like Dr. Tansey.
Oh yeah, yeah,
To
yeah,
look at.
yeah, yeah. She's the old, she's the lab lady.
Mhm. And the other thing is, I think in the phase two, the mindful, they don't have a threshold for inflammation. Like I think whereas in the phase one, they were trying to, say the ESR has to be a certain amount or CRP. Um, I don't remember seeing that. And presumably, if this is like an inflamed cohort of patients, um, that might be an issue.
One more time.
No, the mindful study, the phase two,
Yeah.
when I was looking at the inclusion criteria, I don't think I saw anything about having an elevated ESR or like inflammatory biomarkers.
Isn't that the whole point?
Um, yeah, exactly. And so I was wondering, is that just so that they could increase enrollment in their study? Because it looked like for the phase one, they did have that.
Yeah, I don't know. They don't have an IND. There's no U.S. study sites.
Yeah, it's not US.
No IND, I'm guessing.
I did not see one, but
That's usually not a good sign.
isn't that like AVXL too, where they did it all outside the US?
Yeah. So you got 24 weeks, which is, like a blink of an eye.
Yeah, that's the thing is I don't know if that's fast enough to pick anything up. All the like donanemab and other studies are like 76 weeks.
Yeah, but did donanemab separate at 24 weeks is the question.
I think it just starts. I was looking at those curves, and I think just at 24 weeks it starts to separate.
Somebody said they're at clinical hold in the US.
Well, I know they had a CRL for manufacturing of X Pro. I don't know if they ever got that back, like
Yeah, that's
got
probably it.
that resolved.
Somebody says donanemab was stat sig at 24 weeks. But donanemab study was also 1,000 patients or something, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I was wondering, Do you think like that you tweet about the adverse effects like IMMB trial? You think it's like because like their core approach is fundamentally flawed, or due
Yeah,
to like
yeah.
an off? Okay.
Do you do much biopharma?
No, I'm kind of like trying to learn more about it,
Okay. Yeah. I
but
mean, when companies design drugs, they try to use some kind of, I mean, they sort of form a target in mind, a biological target that they hope that their drug will have an effect on, which will in turn have an effect on the disease.
I got you. And like, do you think like with like the market, you think it's like already priced into the adverse news, or there's still like room to move?
What's that?
Do you think that like with like the news on like the IMMB, you think like the stock price is already priced in?
So they have these results coming up, and the results will either be good or be bad or be indifferent, and we'll find out in a few weeks. Markets are very effective at pricing things in, right? And the market is pricing in basically a 1% chance of the drug working because a good Alzheimer's drug is worth billions. And this company's stock is not worth billions, it's worth a fraction of that. So the market is telling you there's a very, very low chance of probability, but the market's not always right.
Yeah. So like I could use like the market as like a factor to determine like not the probability but like the likelihood of some said company working out.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the company's approach is flawed. I doubt the drug works. I have a pretty good handicap on these things. I'm usually right. You could call me the Steph Curry of biotech if you want to. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying if you called me that, I wouldn't object to it. But I think that you can spot when a drug is poorly designed and doesn't work. And like Cassava is a good example. Galectin was another good example. And this is a pretty good example too.
Sweet man, I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks, Steph. Have a good one.
Yeah, it'll be 1,000x if it hits. Maybe even 10,000x. Maybe even a million x. I see a lot of people lined up at the grocery store buying lotto tickets too.
Yeah.
Seems like the people who write the lotto tickets get the upper hand on that.
And this one, I mean, isn't as much like with Sava, it was really that semiphylum and filament A really have no role in the disease,
I don't think
and
TNF
that
alpha has a role in the disease
that's
either.
what I think. Yeah, that's yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
it's funny
the
because
whole
the transmembrane thing is like missing the forest for the trees. The first thing you have to worry about is Alzheimer's an inflammatory disease? Is it an autoimmune disease? Is it a perhaps a protein misfolding, you know, uh, proteasome, Golgi, endoplasmic reticulum disease? Is it a lysosomal problem disease? Is it a what do we know about this disease? And the answer is not a lot. We do know prednisone, which reduces TNF by 80%. What you would think that would be, a good thing, but that doesn't work. In fact, it seemed to make cognition worse. The TNF alpha inhibitor etanercept didn't work. In fact, nothing seems to work for Alzheimer's, which is not a good start. So you really have to dance on a pinhead to sort of even form a thesis that you could believe in, which is, well, the dominant negative TNF somehow gets access to the blood-brain barrier, forms heterotrimers. Those heterotrimers stop TNF alpha signaling for TNF TNFR1, but they allow TNFR2 signaling to take place, which is the immunity you want, even though it can't induce apoptosis because there's no death receptor. It's still going to be useful somehow. Oh, and by the way, if you knock out TNFR1, you don't get Alzheimer's. So there are humans who have TNFR1 knockouts. They have no cognitive phenotype. They have an autoinflammatory phenotype, but they don't have a cognitive phenotype. My guess, in fact, is that this drug will make things worse. But you do need apoptosis and necroptosis. In fact, you may need more of it in Alzheimer's disease state where you're trying to gobble up these, these neuritic plaques and tangles and things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and the whole TNFR1, TNFR2, like the TNFR2 being protective and kind of juxtacellular versus paracellular. I think if you just knock down TNF, that should help. And you don't see that with prednisone. So it's almost a moot point that they're just honing in on, oh, well, we're just doing the bad TNF side of things. When inflammation is not even a prominent feature of the illness.
Sorry, I gotta respond to somebody in my YouTube.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like, there's a lot we don't know, and that's always the risk of a short seller. You don't know what you don't know, and you just have to sort of make an educated guess, and you hope you're right. And the rest is, left to fate. But one of the things I want to talk about is PK. They've said that they did do some kind of CSF and analyte. They tested for this drug in CSF.
Yeah, this thing Aquaman is more of an expert
Yeah.
in. He had mentioned that and I think he's out of town, but the O-link assay, I think, reacts with XPro, I guess, because it's this dominant negative molecule, so it will maybe link to the TNF part of that assay, and then you can kind of detect it in CSF. That's my understanding of how they are able to measure it.
Okay, so look, PK is something I've done a lot of. You take the sample, you run your assay, you get again, it's hard for me to imagine why you wouldn't publish this or show the dose response in a corporate presentation. There's just nothing there. All we got is this weird, 1 mg per kg O-link result, which we don't even know if they did it right, but
yeah, with a phase 1, these are the things you're measuring, the PK, all that data, but they didn't give us any of that.
Yeah. It also doesn't look very good. 15% average cytokine reduction isn't exactly what I would write home about. You should be getting 50 to 80, maybe even 90%. These are all cytokines we know and love. IL-6, IL-2, IL-6 moving 5% is what? Why? What's happening here? This isn't I wouldn't put this out as something good. How is this good? 15% is just normal human variation.
Variability, yeah.
What the fuck?
And there's no standard deviation on those. I don't see anything.
Yeah, it's wild. There does appear to be an error bar on the left.
Oh, you mean on the one on the left there?
On the composite, yeah, but notice
you're calling it a composite. I see. So who knows?
Notice that it includes confidence interval above 0.
Yes. So basically, it's not statistically. It hovers at 0. Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel bad. I mean, I feel bad every time one of these happens, but it's also like, look, capital. This sector is a real shit show, right? Like, biotech is a total disaster, partially because of overfunding, and like the hedge funds and mutual funds and VC funds, they just have to stop investing because all these companies are way overcapitalized. And Vivek's, got this issue as well.
Yeah, isn't that what's been going on recently on, I've been following on Twitter all the
Yeah,
companies that are kind of, they have a bad trial, they have all this excess cash, and
right.
then they have these horrible pipelines, and they just want to keep getting their salary, keep the lights, keep living that lifestyle with other people's money and not just return the money back. Like your other stuff doesn't work and it's not good.
Well,
You,
salaries, fat salaries, and bonuses and other perks are really too good to ignore. I mean, you know,
right.
everybody, maybe for everybody else, but not for me. Um, that's usually uh, the strat. But yeah, I think we'll get the answer in what we can have. We have tonight, Wednesday, Friday. So it's 3 days left this week, including their interceding evenings and mornings. And then we got 5 days next week, and then one day the week after that, right?
Yeah.
It'll probably happen that one day, right? That like the last day of the month is my guess. Um, but one of the things that I've been interested in is for a long time, quite frankly, but reawaken my interest is steroid receptor, glucocorticoid receptor, and how does it work? Still pretty mysterious. And TNF is also mysterious. The genes that glucocorticoid or steroids, you know, uh, repress and enhance are pretty much overlap with TNF. So,
Mhm.
because it is
Yeah.
well literally one step downstream. So it doesn't really make sense that you know prednisone, and also you haven't seen industry spend much time or interest in autoimmune thesis of or in autoinflammatory thesis of Alzheimer's, partially because COX-2 didn't work, NSAIDs
Yeah.
don't work.
Well, the
St-
TREM2 is kind of this
st-
microglial mod, and that's
yeah,
failed. So,
yeah, steroids
there
don't
was
work.
some money.
Trem 2 was like the one, maybe let's try it again. Ah, it didn't work either. Like there's been several angles of that tried autoimmune, autoinflammatory here. I personally like the thesis. You know, I actually do think there's a lot of that happening in Alzheimer's, but I think you got to do VLA4 or integrin alpha 4 beta 7. I think you have to
Hmm.
stop integrin trafficking. Um, that's the real dangerous stuff. I think you probably want TNF intact, and
Hmm.
I mean, the immune system's so complicated. I think the people who are lung it are just like knuckle dragging mouth breathers that are like, TNF bad, block TNF, and it's really way more complicated. And
Absolutely.
I put up the Krebs, not the Krebs, the what's the Japanese group, the KEG, the
Hmm.
KEGG maps, and I'm like, here's the immune system. There's 600 nodes here. Why do you think you got to write one? And they're like, oh, good point. It's like you think there's not a lab? Every single node, every single protein has like 6 labs that claim that's the protein. That's the one. That's gonna save it all. In fact, every one of these O-link targets, there's somebody out
Yeah.
there who's saying, make a drug against this, you'll save the day. But it's just a lot of it's guesswork and serendipity, quite frankly.
Yeah. And a lot, I mean, the only drugs working are the alpha beta misfolding and, these aggregations of protein clumps. That's the only thing that's barely worked. And that I think has to say that other things are not maybe as important as that. And maybe preventing that earlier in the process would help as well.
Yeah. Well, what's left on your list to work on?
I'm Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I was trying to find. I mean, you had found some nice things with TNFR1 and 2 in the CSF, and whether you know that's elevated in Alzheimer's versus normal controls. Because if that's a driver of disease, you would expect elevated levels of these receptors. And you don't really see that. There's a couple papers that say there are some papers that say they're not. I just think mechanistically, this doesn't make sense to be playing a huge role in Alzheimer's disease. So I don't, there's not, whereas with Sava, there was from just base level, there was no reasonable chance this drug worked. Or even you, because you did the whole modeling and found that there's nowhere for it to even bind.
Yeah.
Filamin is not even important. The drug doesn't even bind anything relevant. This one, it seems like it's just an accumulation of, the basic science didn't really pan out. The preclinical data with the mice don't really work out. And then the human data is horrible. So I don't know what that nail in the coffin will be.
Well, we don't know the
Other
human
than,
data is the problem.
what's that?
Is it horrible or we don't know it? It's a little bit of both.
We don't know it, but if they're not disclosing, like, I want to know what were the mini mentals on all those patients?
Sure.
Which of those patients were the low dose and which were the high dose? If there were 9 patients left and 6 of them were high dose, there's 3 that are, low or medium dose. What were those scores compared to the high? They don't give any of that data. Then they hone in on white matter, like MRI imaging to show neuroinflammation, which is like a novel biomarker that hasn't been validated, and hone in on this arcuate fasciculus with 40% decrease in inflammation. Arcuate fasciculus, that's like for like language, that has nothing to do with like memory or what I would expect the issues to be in Alzheimer's disease. So they just like cherry pick whatever looks great by random chance in like 2 or 3 patients and hone in on that. It's very suspect.
Yeah. What about this CSF phosphatide 217?
Yeah, I'm trying to find that in my little deck here.
It declined by almost a log. No placebo, of course, but
Yeah, there's no placebo. And I assume those are the 6 patients that made it to the end of the study. And is that JAMA paper? I feel like I had looked at that. Was that just a poster or?
yeah, it's a study on phosphatide 217.
Oh, okay.
I like this. XPro improves synaptic function. Well, that's quite a claim. That is quite a claim. We also only have week 4 data there. They just don't know how to
Yeah,
present
on that
data.
proteomics analysis.
No, EEG alpha power.
Oh, okay.
But it's like, bro, like,
Oh yeah, they had some other abstract or recent thing where they looked at like synaptic proteomics and looked to see what was up and what was down. And again, it was very suspect.
yeah, I think that it mostly is a company that doesn't look like they know how to like submit stuff for publication or like put together a presentation and that investors would care about. It's either that or like they're being malicious. And Aquaman, I think, thinks they're being malicious.
Hmm. They had some webinar where it seemed to suggest they were gonna be forthcoming with the data. You know, they were kind of like, we're gonna see the results, and like, doesn't work, it doesn't work. We're like moving on. That's what at least they claimed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what that means, right? Like, I have to look back at the phase threes for Coronado and see what they did. You know, did they
What was that? The phase three?
for Coronado, his last company?
Oh,
Yeah, did they like I have to look at who's on the board and stuff like that too.
yeah. So I guess I saw. Yeah, that's work to do then. Because yeah, who are these characters?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's my thesis. $50 million financing to launch what? Hyperliquid cryptocurrency. Oh my god. Reserve strategy, Inovia. This used to be a drug company. Why do you want to short? I think this could be long. These things work for a few minutes and then they fail. They work and then they don't. Did this just come out? This was earlier today. Hmm. Yeah, it's a shame none of those guys want to chat and learn how to actually do this.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's the type of people who are going along the stock. They just have some cognitive guardrails, but it's always great learning from you. So thanks for doing this.
No, no, no. It's my pleasure. I learned just as much from you. Snaking has been following it really closely. I don't know if he wants to say something or not. Type in the chat, doesn't matter. Yeah, one of the things about medicine that I've learned over the years is that you can't. It's very, very hard to design a drug that works. And if you are going to design a drug that works, it really can't be random. Like there's just a really limited ability for drugs to just work on their own. Just all of a sudden have efficacy without being like really precision designed to do so. The old days of like serendipity in medicine are more or less gone. Um, so to me, I wouldn't advance an Alzheimer's drug into phase two unless one, the phase two is remarkably large, got me a lot of information on dose range. Um, got me some really good biomarkers. Um, it was a really long term study, like at least a year. And one of the best things, one of the best ways to learn if your drug doesn't work is through lack of a dose response. If at any point your dose response does not look normal, your drug doesn't work.
Right.
And that's something that a lot of people kind of miss. So I think that there's there's a big benefit to, like, when Biogen did the lecanemab phase 2, it was like 800 patients, really long term, lots and lots of doses. And, they got a good sense for target engagement. If you're not engaging your target, then what are you doing? And I feel like that assay, that panel that they show, is actually really bad. Like, I would not show that if I were them. I'd go back to the drawing board. Like, I need to see a dose response. Like, why don't they show? Well, they kind of do in that little side thing. They show this really weird. Let me pull it up. Let me zoom in on it. Super zoom. But, like, if CSF inflammation is what Alzheimer's is all about, which is like a tenuous, really tenuous claim, then I'm having a really hard time seeing that this is a 15% reduction. It feels like you should push this dose. So this is what you're trying to reduce. And you feel at 1 milligrams per kilogram, you've fully engaged the target. Well, showing this O-link, you haven't fully engaged the target.
Right.
Most of these things aren't moving at all. You think a 10% change in cytokines is going to change Alzheimer's? No. Alzheimer's is going to require, like, it's funny, amyloid, people worried that, like, reducing amyloid by 90% isn't enough. You have to reduce it by like 99%. And that's why donanemab and these other drugs aren't working that great, because they just
Right, the brain shuttle. Yeah, Roche is spending all this money on getting more of this stuff into the brain.
Yeah.
Because they want 99%.
And you see that in things like prostate cancer, where you really do need to sop up all the testosterone. You need to, like, completely eliminate it. So, yeah.
I had a question about, like, general question. Like, what's the biggest mistake that you see biotech companies make when they think a drug should work but it doesn't?
I don't know if there's a lot of those. I mean, I think that probably the biggest mistake is, like, when you're a small company and you don't want to give up. That happened a lot with, say, Cassava and others. Like, there's pride of authorship. I mean, if you make a drug and you design it and you say, this is mine, it's really hard to walk away from it often. And I think you have to be twice as, like, critical. So I invented this drug called RE024, I think. And that was a code name. And I was really critical of it. In fact, before I left the company that I started, I basically said that this drug's not going to work. It needs to be redone. You have to be, like, really careful that you're not falling for your own bullshit. But I think the problem is that there's this agency problem, owner-agency conflict, which is the first thing you learn about in any business textbook, which is that the managers of the organization and the owners of organization have two different goals. And this is a problem that's been ever present in business. The goal of the managers is to perpetuate what's best for them using the organization. The goal of the owners is to perpetuate what's best for them using the managers who work at the company. But so often the managers say, well, what would be better if we gave up on phase 1 and went back to the drawing board and did a whole bunch of science? Our stock would take a hit and we'd have no news for 3 years. but it's a lot more exciting to potentially do, just rush forward with the data, and maybe we get lucky, but at least we get our salaries and things like that. Nobody's gonna fire us. So, I think there's oh, there you go. Thank you for that. CSF um, tau levels there went
Well,
up,
so
went up with went up with the low
well,
dose.
that's what I want to
The
know. Why does
fuck?
the presentation, your presentation has like it in log form? What, and this is where you're more of an expert than
Yeah.
me, but how can they kind of cherry pick or present the data in a way to make it look better? Because that's
Well,
showing
mine
that it
is
goes
in
up.
base. That mine's from baseline, right? So from baseline, this doesn't even make sense. Um, One, there's no need to use log changes, right?
Right. You just go
And
percent change. Yeah.
um, yeah, this looks just like somebody who didn't know what they're doing. Um, I don't know. This is like
Because
meaningless.
that's from one of their presentations.
It's kind of conflicting with the thing you showed.
Yeah. Yeah, this picture here.
Yeah, exactly. Seems to
That's the
conflict.
exact same data, but how are they?
It seems to conflict because
Oh, they removed the low dose. They're just looking at high dose, and they're showing the 50%. Okay, so they're now just honing in on the 1 mg per kg, and they're just saying here's baseline and here's 12 weeks, and it went down what 50%?
yeah, but how is that like what is the minus 2.2 log?
Yeah, I have no
Because
clue.
2.2 log is 99%, right?
Yeah,
And minus 3 log is 0.999. So I just don't get it. Like they actually went down 40%. But what's really bizarre, Z, is that the zero point 0.3 mg per kg went up. And this just this data just says this is an uncalibrated piece of crap experiment. Like this is terrible because there's no placebo, right? And Lord knows what happened to the zero point 0.6 mg per kg group. God only knows what that data is. But I assume that one makes it even more inconsistent.
right.
And at zero point 0.3 mg, somehow this drug makes you much sicker, but it's simply 3x the dose. It makes you much better. You just throw this away and say this is worthless.
Yeah, I mean there's really no. It's like the opposite.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out this is a long shot, which is what I really like about the Discord because they're like, oh, yeah, you must be an idiot. You don't like the stock. And it's like, well, listen, I got to tell you, 30% of the stock is shorted. An Alzheimer's drug is worth $10 billion. It's trading at 200. So it's a 2% chance of success. A lot of red flags, but I guess I'm the dumb one. Cassava, Galectin. I mean, literally the dozens of biotechs. It's always the same story. And again, no matter how patiently or carefully I try to explain myself, it never changes a single mind. I can't say that. Some people say, Martin, thank you. I sold my Cassava, and I'm really happy I didn't lose 90% of my money. But most people just,
Matt Knock Tribe didn't listen to you.
yeah, Matt. Would have been happy to help him. That guy's rich as hell.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, you try to save him from a very expensive mistake. Yeah, I guess the only other thing would be I need to do more research on the board of directors and what, you know, with Sava there was all the fraud. It doesn't sound like that here. Um, so just that they're kind of honest and forthcoming with the results. Don't try and drag this out and, oh, we did a subgroup analysis, and in this group they did well. We didn't do any Bonferroni correction for multiple testing, but we found this group went really well, and we're going to pursue that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one question is, how do you get across the blood-brain
Oh, the blood-brain barrier.
barrier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing where we were thinking, like, these big proteins really don't do well crossing the blood-brain barrier, but probably some of it does, and you don't need a lot to neutralize, because TNF is pretty, there's not a lot in the brain. So I don't know how much of that you would need to cross. But yeah, that if it doesn't even cross the blood-brain barrier, then that's even more of a reason that this drug does.
Yeah. I don't know.
Shkreli, have you checked out Spotify at all?
Not a little bit.
It's they're showing some pretty nice numbers for 2024. They're
That's,
showing profitability, which is pretty
I think that's
impressive.
why
And
it's pretty expensive.
yeah, I think it's a 116p ratio, but I don't really pay attention to that because I'm watching the multiples kind of collapse a little bit, and I think it's going to continue to collapse. It I don't really follow Peter Thiel much.
I actually know what you're saying, but okay.
I mean, like the price multiples, they're collapsing. They're getting really small. Well,
PE
not really
multiples.
getting small, but
Are you talking about
like
PE?
no, like price to net income, price to free cash flow and
That's what
stuff.
PE is, yes.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it's really good. I think I really like their product. They have a lot of user growth, and they're
Okay.
expanding their net income really well.
It does seem like the market understands that pretty well. It's 150 billion market cap.
I know it's a hot take, but I think it's still undervalued
Okay.
because I could only see it continue to grow, even in 2022 when everything kind of took a little dump and
Let's see, at
things kind of slowed
150
down.
billion market cap, that means I don't know what they maybe have addressable market of $1 billion. That Spotify's relationship with everyone is worth 100 some odd dollars, basically. That seems overvalued to me because ultimately they do have to pass through almost everything they get has to go to the artist. So I don't know.
They
It seems
still
like
have
it's
nice
misaligned.
margins. I mean, their gross margin is around 30%. It's continuing to grow.
Yeah, 30%. If it grows much more, you're going to get artists that say, wait a second, I don't need Spotify. And I don't want Spotify. I'm going to do this myself. So their margins have a natural cap where Spotify is, if they screw the artist enough, the artist is going to say, hey, I don't want to use this thing. 30% of my money is going to some fucking guy in Sweden.
Yeah, that can happen as well. I mean, I completely agree. But their operating leverage is also really good. I mean, 2024 kind of proved that. Their expenses dropped and their revenues, went 18%. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Also, their premium is the highest margin um, sector because they make money on ads and they also make money on premium subscriptions. And nobody listens to Spotify without premium. I mean, I don't really know anybody who doesn't have a Spotify subscription. Apple Music's good too, but everybody has this app and they use it basically every day.
Okay. Back to INmune. Soluble TNF causes inflammation, cell death, and demyelination. Transmembrane TNF promotes immune function, is neuroprotective, and improves synaptic plasticity. That's doing a lot of heavy lifting. How do you activate this
On
receptor?
the blood-brain barrier question, like in the Discord, I pasted that photo. I think it's from their like one of their patents. But you were saying that that's enough to show there is, there is some crossing it. I just don't know that that's more than, any other sort of antibody protein.
Yeah, it's not a small amount.
Yeah, because you look at like serum is like, you know, thousands of nanograms per milliliter, and then they have to like really mess with the scale to get down to like
Yeah.
3 nanograms per milliliter, like
Yeah.
1,000-fold less. Sorry, and it didn't rotate.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And that was, I think, in mice, like the
I was gonna say,
cuperazine
what was the
causes.
original dose administered?
Oh, the amount that they gave the animal? That's a
Yeah.
good question. I have to look back at that. But yeah, it's in their
Yeah,
methods of
that's pretty
use.
important.
Yeah.
Low nanograms per milliliter is not great, but arguably it's fine. But mice are not men,
Yeah.
so there's a little bit of questions there. I mean,
Normally they would have just done like an ELISA or something if they wanted to measure it in that phase 1 when they drew the CSF, they could just measure the amount in the CSF directly.
I love this. Currently approved TNF inhibitors are contraindicated for neurological disease because they promote myelination. What the fuck? And promote axon degeneration, bro. You're gonna hurt these poor people. I think the willingness of people to believe, like just blindly believe, like published work is that's not been replicated is like very sad.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, people who have not produced published work don't realize how much how many times you try and find a significant value and really don't correct for that or talk about it in the methods. And then yeah, someone reads it as if it's, gospel. It's funny.
You're sort of incentivized to lie because you get funding, whereas
Yeah,
in the
publish or perish.
yeah, in the corporate world, it's the opposite. You really are incentivized to make sure that you get it right, because if you spend $50 million, wasting money on some project, then you're never going to do another $50 million project.
So, Shkreli, I got a consonant for you, consonant replacement. INmD. I mentioned this in the chat. This is 5 times earnings. I think still also a single digit multiple to cash flow. Med devices out of Israel.
All right, we can look at it after this saga is done. One saga at a time. When you do one of these, you have to really focus on it. You can't just like flippantly kind of like go back and forth. You have to be super tied in, glued in, focused. So let me see this little thing they showed. So this is some weird model of Cooper zone induced demyelination. Okay. Trying to figure out how they did this. And what it means. What means. Well, here's whatever they're saying demyelination was.
Yeah, and that's like more like an MS type model. Like Alzheimer's is not this strong demyelinating disease.
Correct.
So some of
But
this
if
is like
it's axonal, maybe, axonal survival. That doesn't sound off. I don't know. But you're right about myelination. I mean, that's not. Okay, so is CPZ, is this time? And is the idea that, okay, look how, I mean, but look at how bad the state is. Like, this is really like cherry picked. No difference. No difference. This one has a difference. I'm just trying to figure out, like, what are we supposed to be impressed by?
I mean, those all look very similar.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay,
cool.
so
We can't
this is
accept.
this is dosing. Yeah, no, this one looks better for X Pro, the middle one. But why isn't it better at 3 and why isn't it better at 6?
Oh, it doesn't alter demyelination, but promotes myelin recovery.
Well, irrespective, the signal should be pretty uniform. Let me see if I can find the methods. Some of these are really kind of cringe. Again, dose response problems. Let me see if I make sure I know what I'm looking at here.
So I'm trying to find the dose they used in the IP, so for that blood-brain barrier.
So it didn't prevent oligodendrocyte loss, but it did permit early remyelination. Like what? How would it improve phagocytosis if it doesn't make any fucking sense? The whole point of TNF is that TNFR1 has a death receptor and can do apoptosis and necroptosis, whereas TNFR2 literally cannot do that. So it's just like a lot of mixed signals about how it quote unquote works. Yeah, I don't know. I've definitely seen enough to make a call. I don't know if I want to write a long screed on this.
You can have ChatGPT start a draft for you.
Maybe. I don't know. No bulls. Well, we'll know in a really short period of time, right? No later than 2 weeks.
Right around the corner.
Yeah.
8 business days.
Yeah, really soon.
Gave 10 mgs per kg.
Yikes.
That's a lot.
Yes, it's a huge amount. 10 mgs per kg to get to 3 nanometers. Oof, 3 nanometers.
Yeah, mice received subcutaneous saline or X-Pro sub-Q 10 mgs per kg twice weekly for 2 months. When administered peripherally, XPro is detectable in the brain, 1 in 6 nanograms per milliliter, which is sufficient to neutralize native soluble. That's in their paper here, through the soluble heterotimer.
Okay. So 10 mg per kg, and they're giving 1 mg here or 1 mg per kg?
In this picture?
No, in human.
Oh, in human, yes. One was the high dose, 1 mg per kg. Whoa, so they're giving 10 times more?
Is it per kg or just 1 mg?
In humans, it's 1 mg per kg.
Okay. Are you sure?
At least that's what that picture there. Yeah, it says 1 mg per kg right there. But let me double check that.
Okay, yeah. In clinical trials like that, that's what it says. Yeah, so
Yeah,
the
1 mg per kg.
allometric scaling is.
In humans, though, I think it's IV, right? This is sub-Q in the
No.
mice.
No, I think it's sub-Q.
In human?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah. Oh yeah, via subcutaneous injection once a week for 12 weeks. In mice, it was twice a week. So would you expect that to be a lower, I mean, obviously you can't compare, human and mouse blood-brain barrier dynamics, 1-to-1, but it should have a much lower dose there, right? In the serum, if you're only giving 1/10 of the concentration, or even less would get to the blood-brain, to the brain.
Yes. The estimated human CSF Cmax 0.4 nanograms per milliliter. But I don't even know if they're showing a Cmax. I assume that's Cmax in terms of dose. What is it says levels. Great. Usually levels.
Oh, I need to send you this. Sorry.
Levels means Cmax, but it could mean something else. More levels. Could be Cmen. Either way. But usually when you do these things, you're trying to do Tmax, Cmax, Cmin, AUC, it's basic PK. The data, they just never have any of this data. It just makes you wonder.
It's from the paper that I was looking at in mice, XPro in the brain.
Again with these levels. Yeah, so similar amount, 2, 3.
It's a massive decrease.
From brain to serum?
Yeah, I mean, it's going from 10 to the 4th to single digits, so
Kind of
thousands.
What you would expect, I think, right?
With a protein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that you also have differences in plasma binding, right? So
Yeah.
Plasma binding is something everyone forgets about in PK.
I mean, so that amount may be enough to neutralize in the brain, even though it's a very small amount.